We are in Ufer Studios Berlin, and actually we are here because Sheena is also working in HCT, and we got the opportunity to work in the studio for free, and this was very helpful because otherwise I think we could not have made this work.
I think it's easy to say that and to say that, you know, and I want to resist myself from also going with that narrative to say, yeah, we can say there's more pedestrian conceptual work, but for me, I'm also trying to think about actually also trying to understand what do we mean when we say physical, or what is physicality. I think one of the things I could say I miss more is expression, as opposed to, not as opposed to, but thinking about also how expression operates in work, which for me is so much connected to physicality, which is one of my interests, which I also miss to see in the scene. But maybe that's also to think about how we understand the scene, or where we understand the borders of that scene to appear as well, or if it's a scene or scenes in general.
But you can also visit many different circles.
Sure,
in Berlin, I think, which is so nice also about the city. Yeah. That you can go on holidays in your own city in a way. Yeah. Sometimes it can be only a circle of 2 people, for example, or a very specific friendship that has its own dynamics and its own world and thoughts and interests. And sometimes it can be a bigger group. But I feel it's all the time really, I don't know, I feel it's really shifting, and that things that also people within these circles exchange. And
I can also just say that for me, Berlin, there's something about access to the city, or how people gain different access to different resources, but different scenes, different ways of being mobile here. And that's something I also see that people struggle with, coming here with the idea to be an artist. Also, I have friends that leave because the pace is not fast enough, coming from London, where there's the idea that you come here and you make work, but actually nothing is really happening. And it's interesting for me how people access the scene, and also how that is sustainable when everything is so temporal, in the sense of how we're moving, how we're working. And that's something that's been of real interest for me, and actually politically to find ways of staying here and working here. And how I got access to this city is actually through Ponderosa, actually from the countryside 10 years ago, and of meeting like Peter Plyer, Andrea Keitz, a bunch of people who were running K77 studio in Kastanjanalli, and basically they gave me the key there and they said, do whatever you want.
wow.
And then I created a festival in 2008 with people who had met in Berlin and people who had studied with in Laban in London. And basically I did that already in 2008 with just like, hey, do what you want. So for me, that was also something of feeling that there's such potential here to do things, or there's the possibility. And then from then, of course, coming here and studying, and then going to K3, and then now coming back as a staff at HCT. And it's also something interesting to see how the students gain access to things or not, or what sort of status you have in relation to the things that you've done before. And how things are simply closed off for a lot of people, or even for others who've been working here for a long period of time. Like, how do you access certain institutions in certain places, like Sobottke, or how, when you haven't got the skills or the interest to have those negotiations, or to promote your work in the way that the market asks you to do so. So that's also a question for me right now, is accessibility, sustainability, and temporal communities, or how we understand scene then in relation to those 3 things. And how do we come together as some sort of temporal community that is about addressing the political agenda in Berlin for the free arts. It's not only about coming together and discussing these things, it's actually about putting it into actions. So for me, it's something like now with Agora Move, which is the new space in Berlin, coming soon. Please do some crowdfunding for us and donate. But basically, for me, this is one of the ways of being political, is to say, actually, what we need is an artist run space that basically also circulates curation, that also gives people the feeling that they have agency to do things, to make things. That was also for me coming back to a very personal thing of like, yes, I can do things, I can make things happen. And I feel sometimes we're often reliant on the green light from if we get funding or if a house in Berlin wants to present our work, but I feel we have to mobilize in a different way. We have to take space, and we have to also create the spaces we want to live, work in, and collaborate in. And for me, that's for me is the political level. And that also asks questions about continuity and sustainability, which also plays back into how do we also finance that.
To not stick to the system that is actually imposed on us, like the system of, okay, I have to write application to Berliner Senat or to HKF or to K3 or to all these places that exist that are there for supporting our work, but that there are also other ways to go. That I don't know. There are actually many other ways one can take, and I don't mean to work without money, but I think like possibilities or money can be made in many other ways. So, like.
Well, for me, it's also in connection to like these alternative modes of producing, or what we put value on, like real money, or different sorts of resources like free space, or like coming together in a kind of situation where we can share practice, where it doesn't cost us anything, where we can share knowledge. So also for me, it's like, how can we start to identify these different economies differently in relation to the resources that are already there.
For me, it's a concern since last year, November or something like this, is actually what is the different situation of women and men in the arts in general, or also not only in the arts but worldwide. When I look, for example, at women that are in positions of responsibility, or women who make decisions, then I actually don't limit it to the work that we do, but it's something much more broad for me. And I think in this year I have been encountering a lot of women actually in work. Like we had a meeting that was offered to us by Ludger from Tanzfabrik, where we met with a group of young makers from Berlin, and then we did this thing with Meg and Maria, and where we were actually occupying H1 for a week, and it was a group really only consisting of women. So in a way there was this topic of what does it mean something, or what does it mean that we are women? And I have the feeling that a lot of people talk now about feminism, about feminist theory more than before, actually.
For me, I'm often finding myself in conversations about how we spend time, or the desire to spend time differently. Of course, in relation to work and labor and invisible labor, and I think that's also interesting now, thinking about production, or how we produce, also especially for this piece, getting €2,000, and then the amount of other things that are attached to that as well. And I think it connects to some of these issues that you were anyway talking about with feminism as well. I think of course we start to rethink these things, but I think I'm often finding myself really questioning, how do I spend time, or actually how do I start to separate the certain kind of compartments, and less I'm having time to actually be in a situation that I don't understand as work. That often when I'm often hanging out with people who I'm either working with, or who I want to work with, or who I have worked with. And Yeah, for me, it's a real collision of many different things, and it's something we all know, and it's something that we're all doing. But for me, this is where the scene gets interesting because of where are the borders.
Important to go away from Berlin and to go also to other places to see how is it to work in a different place than here. I find it very important. I would never want to, for example, now I work here the whole summer and I don't know, it gives me a bit of hangover feeling. Hangover from Germany, hangover of Berlin. I think this is also something that is so great about our job, no? That it actually allows us to go into different places and.
True, but then how can we find the right middle point? Because if on one hand we understand that we need somehow also to generate the conditions, no? This implies also certain engagement on insisting, no, and keeping certain continuity. Mm-hmm. If we continue traveling as much as we do, at least my experience is that sometimes I feel that I'm losing also the thread, or I feel always like cutting things in the middle. And
yeah, for me this is rather a question, for example, of where can I find, for example, for the work that I do, a home in Berlin, and this would mean to have now at the moment, for example, look for a studio, and I look for a studio where I can really feel, where I can ground the work, where I can say, okay, this is the home of my work, and where I can leave things in the space, where I can build something, something that I feel is mine in a way, or is the works, and for me this is rather the question. And I could have this probably also if I would go to I don't know, Japan, and I would have a studio there for 2 months. So for me this is.
So it's for you to just, also for me that's the issue with like not having continuity. Also how we produce is so broke up, in the sense that we produce 2 weeks here, and then we go maybe to Pack for 2 weeks, and then we go to, I don't know, Zurich for another week, and then we come back and we have 3 more weeks at Ufer Studios before we premiere on a stage. And I think there's something, for me, it's also about sustainability or continuity, in the sense of actually how we occupy certain spaces or how we work in those spaces, that often it's quite segmented, the process. Well, it's also for me a connection of where do we understand home, and also this is something that I'm often encountering with people, or conversations of where is home actually for people, whether that's also in terms of like how people are subletting here, or the increasing difficulty of finding a space in Berlin to live, and I think there is a big desire for people to have a sense of home, and that also comes with investment, and also making a choice to also stay, and it's also something that I've been able to do because of having a consistent job here. And then of course you can be active in the city in a really different way.
True. How do we provide also these conditions that are not necessarily based on particular projects or individual projects or specific people's project, no? How it generates actually this common place? Actually, it's like the soil, no? The same thing with taking care of a garden. Like it's not like because this is my plant or this is my tree, but you also have to nurture the earth itself. So I'm going a little bit more like that. It's like how to work towards keeping the conditions fertile rather than what is actually what kind of plant will come out of this.
But this is my issue.
This is what I mean, that it goes beyond particular projects.
Sure, but I also think that's also the problem, is that we're thinking in projects.
With how do you nourish your personal concerns or questions or practice. And I guess it is also different throughout lifetime. I don't know. I guess some people change this a lot, so they keep on experimenting a lot. They are very curious. They try out a lot of different things, and some people find like one practice, and then like these film directors who say, actually, I have done my whole life only one film, and they find a certain practice or question, and then they keep with this and they repeat it and they explore it in all kinds of directions and they widen it. And I think maybe for this kind of practicing, it's when you have found that, it's maybe easier and you can just go wherever.
I think it's, for me, it's a lot about presence and this continuity factor. I haven't got an answer of how that could look like at all, but and also for me, I think it's this whole scene thing, maybe even a fifth layer, is even this idea of family or expanding this idea of family, because it is my family here. It's the closest thing I have right now in terms of geographic location, and that also plays a big role for me. And of course that's in connection to presence as well, and also investment. Also, how do we invest in the city or in our home or in the people, or and I don't think investment also equals what you get in return either, or how that's also like somehow paid back in terms of money or how you produce or anything like this. And that's why I feel it's important that we start to think and act in different ways beyond the institution. And I don't know, I think we have to we have to kind of see bigger than our own projects and own desires, and that's very difficult to do. I also think for myself, what do I get from being in the city and to be here on a daily basis? What's it giving me? Like, what's the reason to stay here and not go somewhere else?
And what is it?
I think I can actually say that in some sense I really feel like family is a strong thing. It's really home.
I guess with the family, the thing is that you always have also moments where you reject your family, where you reject your mom and your dad and your siblings. And I guess this is also something what I experience here, but I don't consider this as something negative. It's not nothing negative for me. It's just,
I also don't feel it's negative, but it's also for me to think like there's such a kind of strong desire in me to keep being insistent with this place, because I also feel like it has, it's from my first access moment, take the key and do something. And it's that kind of attitude where I still feel it's possible to do that. Maybe it is in other cities, but this is where I really feel also as a foreigner to say, take a key and do something. And to have that flexibility and that freedom.
I also feel that there's actually a lot of freedom here.
But I think I also have the desire to be closer to people and to be closer to people's work. And to see the work that I do more, that there is more cross-pollination in a way, that is happening on different levels and not this kind of referencing, which I also is happening. But the desire to be closer to things.